Hello and welcome to Not Now in Theaters. My name is Will Turntail and I'm a writer and film fan from California. This episode is all about the retro animated adaptation of The Hobbit. Animated by Japanese studio Topcraft and produced by the classic animation studio Rankin. It's a colorful adaptation that I would say has more fans than not fans, but can divide opinion. One thing is for sure, it's a hell of a lot shorter than that Peter Jackson trilogy. So I'm a big fan of it, and I'm happy to break down for you my reasons why I think it still has a place for Tolkien fans. Before we start, a reminder that making films is hard and you have to respect that. So any criticisms are meant to be constructive. If you don't know the story of The Hobbit, then this review will contain spoilers. Okay, let's get into the movie. The Hobbit 1977, how the animated tale tickles your fuzzy Hobbit feet. At some point in my elementary school life, one of my teachers wheeled in a TV, cut the lights, and put on the Rankin animated adaptation of The Hobbit. My eyes widened, and I was hooked. I knew wizards, but this was my first introduction to a fantasy world full of goblins, elves, trolls, dwarves, and deadly giant spiders. Complete with magic swords to wield, riddles to solve, and dragons to slay, The Hobbit kept me stuck to the chair from start to finish, and probably a relief for my teacher. With HBO Max currently streaming The Hobbit, I wondered if this adaptation had any merit outside my childhood nostalgia. Best known for their, quote, animagic stop-motion productions like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or Frosty the Snowman, animators Rankin/Bass teamed up with Japanese company Topcraft to adapt J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit as an animated musical television special. The movie had a $3 million budget, and its creator pledged not to add anything outside of the original work. First aired on NBC in 1977, the film currently sits at 71% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 65% audience score, pointing to generally favorable reviews. But it's been nearly 50 years since that debut. Can the movie provide any value today? Let's find out. Is The Hobbit 1977 a good movie? The Hobbit 1977's plot. The Hobbit is the story of Bilbo Baggins' journey from a humble, bumbling homebody into a quick-witted, daring burglar. It's the precursor to the fabled Lord of the Rings trilogy. Gandalf the Wizard and Dwarf King Thorin Oakenshield present Bilbo Baggins with an opportunity to join their quest to free Lonely Mountain from the evil dragon Smaug. Bilbo, despite being a home-loving hobbit, accepts. With his 13 dwarven companions, Bilbo embarks on a journey that will take the party across the world of Middle-earth. They battle dangerous creatures and discover magical objects along the way. Will Bilbo and his party recover the treasure from Smaug? And just to take you through the cast of this fine animated feature, the legendary John Huston plays Gandalf the Wizard, Hans Conried plays Thorin Oakenshield, Bilbo Baggins is voiced by Orson Bean, was an amazing name for a hobbit, right? The dragon Smaug is voiced by Richard Boone. And you can read the rest of the main cast here in the transcript. So let's get into what is good about this movie. First, I want to call out its visual style and animation, which is an obvious place to start, which is worth 6 points. The animated format has benefits. The look of The Hobbit draws heavily on the work of Arthur Rackham, giving it a fairyland watercolor aesthetic. The bright colors and blocky style bring a whimsical Middle-earth, where even the monsters look more misguided miscreants than hardcore baddies. The character design is fun, from pointy-nosed Gandalf to the wrinkly old dwarves. And if you want to see what I'm talking about, I got links to all of these things at the bottom of this episode transcript, where it says links in this episode. Yeah. One neat trick is that Bilbo seems to have larger eyes than the other characters, intentionally or unintentionally. This gives him a bit of a wide-eyed wonder on his journey from the Shire to Lonely Mountain. And that's helpful. While the dwarves are world-savvy, Bilbo is formally world-weary, rarely leaving home, so that open-eyed approach fits. Characters are depicted in delightful, otherworldly proportions relative to one another, which are hard to execute in live action. With actors, it would be near impossible to mimic rail-thin, skinny wood elf bodies or the tubby shapes of the goblins with their short limbs and pudgy bellies. This can be done with CGI, but it will probably look like crap and cost a fortune. It's a unique, playful look at a world where the swords are sharp, but you don't see them cut anything. Next, it is riddle time with Gollum and Smaug, which adds 4 points. Bilbo's riddle games with Gollum and the confrontation with Smaug are the highlights of this film. I love this savage version of Gollum. In The Hobbit 1977, he's a strange frog thing rather than the obsequious, fawning shrimp in the Peter Jackson live-action adaptations. But hold your Rotten Tomatoes, I'm okay with it for that version. This Gollum is less desperate and more mad and frantic, more aggressive. This Gollum isn't just ready to play games and covet the ring, he's full-on ready to eat Bilbo. Gollum's confusion and constant asides to "my precious" are intact. His voice actor, comedian brother Theodore, has adapted a raspy, gravelly voice with erratic speech patterns that rise and fall in dramatic volume. Watch Gollum enough, and you'll start imitating him at home for fun. Honestly, I irritated my family for about 2 weeks after watching this movie because I kept trying to be Gollum all the time. Smaug has searchlights for eyes and a fragile ego. He's a mighty dragon, but a bit of a red mangy one, a crass old evil with fangs and an underbite. Some audiences say he's drawn cat-like, and I think that's apt. His treasure is strewn about him, and he's happy to rest on his ill-gotten laurels. Just like my cats when their playtime is done, and they sit in front of my living room's bay window. Voiced by a cranky-sounding Richard Boone, Smaug moves from a state of bemusement to violent rage in a fun interplay with Bilbo. And is it Smaug or Smaug? I like saying both, so if the interchanging is bothering you, let's just stick with Smaug. In confronting Smaug, Bilbo's bravery is the peak of his character development. He's left the comforts of the Shire to face down the legendary dragon, and Smaug's character design and voice acting make the moment memorable. And now, let's discuss Glenn Yarbaugh's The Greatest Adventure and other songs, which adds 2 points. This is a, quote, musical adventure, and many songs pepper the work. The music brings more of the book's spirit into the adaptation, as the songs are based on or inspired by Tolkien's lyrics. Unless it's a musical, singing in live action is too playful for me to take the work seriously. But alongside the animated look and feel, the music blends in seamlessly. There is one original song composed for the film, The Greatest Adventure, sung by Glenn Yarbaughh. It's tacky and lame, especially with the way Yarbaughh warbles and yodels his voice. Yet, set in this vintage movie, yeah, it fits in nicely. It's like a baby swaddle or a cup of hot chocolate by a bit of fire back in the Shire. I've got to admit, I've put a version of the song on my movie soundtrack playlist, and I don't regret that at all. Maybe if I went back to dating, it's one of those things that you'd have to hide, okay? But I'm a kept man, so we're all good there. So now let's discuss what I didn't quite like as much. This first one is called Characters Still in Development, and it takes away 2 points. There aren't exactly Pixar movie moments here that will make you giggle or sob, and the story doesn't invest much in character change for the dwarves or Gandalf. Bilbo's story arc, in which he begins to enjoy the adventure and grows braver and more capable as the story progresses, is acceptable. He and Thorin have friction that reaches a moving reconciliation by the movie's end. Still, Gandalf and the other characters end the film about how they started. It's not quite enough, even for the breezy family adaptation it was aiming for. And the film has unsatisfying action, which takes away 2 points. The Hobbit doesn't show violence directly. Whenever a character strikes a foe with a sword, there's a spinny animated effect and maybe a sad squeal, and they're dispatched. This is pretty unsatisfying, especially when it comes to those stupid evil spiders. I mean, who doesn't want to see an annoying, cocky-ass spider take a stab from an elven sword to the eye? Or maybe get one of their icky legs hacked off by a dwarven axe? And since this tale is told with virtually no visible violence, the Battle of the Five Armies is about as brief as it gets, practically off-screen. But if you keep thinking of this as the Bilbo movie, it makes a lot more sense. So even if the lackluster near absence of combat is here, it's something you can get past, even if you're annoyed. So adding it all up, The Hobbit scores 8 points. On my scale of let's not watch, should I watch or go watch this movie, I'm gonna give it my should I watch rating. With its watercolor backdrops, sing-song nature, and retro animation style, the Rankin Bass animated adaptation of The Hobbit is a children's classic, but one many adults may still enjoy, even without the nostalgia factor. Rather than the all-action, all-you-can-eat, 500 plus minute long Peter Jackson trilogy, this version of The Hobbit is a happy, comforting watch that will clock in under an hour and a half. It's not a film that will move you to tears or feature edge of your seat action, but there's a good time to be had here by all. So if you want to enjoy a vintage animated classic or introduce a new generation to the fantasy genre, here's a near scare-free introduction, my precious. The Legacy of The Hobbit 1977. So what's the legacy of The Hobbit 1977? Well, just like how I was seeing the movie for the first time in an elementary school classroom in the 1980s, many children of the 1970s and beyond took their first taste of Tolkien and Middle-earth from this movie. And since Peter Jackson and co.'s excellent Lord of the Rings films may not be for the smallest kids, yeah, I think there's still a place for this movie now. People on Reddit and other forums still praise the film, and you have to give it credit for that. While it may not have included everything from the books, it is, from what I understand, a faithful adaptation, since everything in the movie is in the book. The film's teleplay won a Peabody Award, and the movie got a Christopher Award. For those of you who don't know what those are, the Peabody Award is one of the oldest awards in television and radio and is quite respected. And the Christopher Award, which I had never heard of, is some kind of Christian award given to works that, quote, affirm the highest values of the human spirit. So there you go. And the film was nominated for the Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, but lost out to Star Wars. I don't quite understand what that means. I thought that was the highest honor of the Hugos, but the story sounds more complicated. But in any case, yeah, hard to compete with OG Star Wars. That would be A New Hope, of course. There wasn't the happiest of critical receptions for the movie, nor the most negative. The New York Times was all right with it, saying it warranted attention despite having shortcomings. But Tolkien scholar Douglas A. Anderson called it execrable. If you don't know, that just means bad. Leave it to a Tolkien scholar to bust out $5 words on us. But of course a Tolkien scholar is going to be upset about the movie. If you're a Tolkien scholar, I think that's 10 degrees worse than the Tolkien fanbase as far as ripping things for their accuracies or inaccuracies. A Tolkien scholar would be the worst audience for any adaptation. So just going to poke at it. A fun fact here, Topcraft, the Japanese animation studio working with Rankin would disband in 1985, and some of its employees joined at the time new, now legendary company Studio Ghibli. If you don't know that name, that's the studio that included the vaunted Hayao Miyazaki, and they've made films like Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, and Howl's Moving Castle. You wouldn't say this film has that Ghibli, Hayao Miyazaki charm to it, but it's got something of its own. And I think that explains what looks like a slightly Japanese art style in some of this. Or maybe I'm just talking out of my butt on that one, but I swear the film looks a little anime here. After this Hobbit movie, things got complicated around more animated Lord of the Rings films. Animator Ralph Bakshi directed the Lord of the Rings 1978, which adapted the Fellowship of the Ring book and the Two Towers book. That movie disappointed me, and some other audiences. The first part that sucks is that they mix regular animation with rotoscoping, a technique of animating over live-action footage. That is incredibly disjointed, and I have no idea why they thought it was fine to mix traditional animation and rotoscoping all together. Second, it's so underwhelming because it ends right there at the conclusion of The Two Towers. Bakshi wanted it released with a, quote, Part 1 tag, and lo and behold, the studio, who I won't name, disagreed, thinking people wouldn't pay for a Part 1 of something. Silly studio. Bakshi was in the right, and we know this because many Part 1s have succeeded over the years. So yeah, Part 2 never came. But what did come is another Rankin Bass movie, The Return of the King from 1980. That one is weird because it only summarizes the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers, then continues with the conclusion of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So if you slap the Rankin Bass movies and the Bakshi movie together, technically you can have some iteration of The Hobbit, Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King, all in animated format. Except those rotoscope parts, which, no. Okay, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you haven't seen it yet, I hope you'll check out The Hobbit 77. I think it's especially great for kids to be introduced to fantasy and Tolkien. And if you've seen it before, what do you think? Does it move way too fast? Or is it a cool retro piece of fantasy animation? You can reach out and let me know on Blue Sky using the link in the transcript, or just search for Will Turn Tail. And if you liked this episode, would you please take a minute or two of your time to leave me a review on rating on this podcast, if you haven't done that already. A few people have rated it before, and I so appreciate that. It makes a massive difference. Or if you're listening on YouTube, hit that like button and subscribe. New episodes of this podcast come out on Thursdays. Next week's episode could be Frank Darabont's The Mist, or I might put that episode off another week to focus on something less horrific and bleak. Though The Mist is for sure worth a discussion because it's very good, but, kind of makes you think, I don't know if I can get out of bed today. So tune in next week for, I don't know, but something worth a listen. This podcast episode is production copyright of Overegged Media LLC, located in Sacramento, California. Reference photos linked in the transcript are copyrighted by the Internet Movie Database. This review's factual information was gathered through online sources like Wikipedia, IMDb, or interviews. Misrepresentations and errors are possible, but unintentional. Introduction music, Neon Laser Horizon by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. And the exit music and additional music are also by Kevin MacLeod, also licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com, I should say. The names of those songs are Voxel Revolution, Adventures in Adventureland, and Proto-Funk. Goodbye for now.